Alright guys, hear me out, ultimate clashing. Hey guys, Trify, back again with another video. If you don't know, recently I've been looking through the Untitled boxing game Discord, particularly the suggestions channel, for new suggestions to cover for you guys, and different ideas that you guys have presented to the community that could be added into the game. And one thing caught my mind, ultimate clashing. At first I wasn't sure what this would mean. I thought this would mean that if both people ultimate at the same time, they would both land their ultimates, which would be pretty weird. I don't know how that would work, and that would pretty much never happen in a realistic setting because there's no situation where both people will raw ult at the same time. But actually looking into it, it seems to be a new mechanic that's supposed to be intended as sort of a counter against ultimates, and particularly PvE fishing for ultimates. Overall, it's pretty interesting, and I highly recommend you guys check it out yourselves. If you guys like the video, you know what to do. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and join the Discord down below. And of course, massive shout out to the 5 members of the Trife channel: Cool Guy Flunker, R-Laws, Lil Z, Brownoy, and Mercenary. So this suggestion was posted by NotNick3127. He starts out by saying that it's pretty annoying when you get ultimated, when you're almost about to knock out your opponent, but they somehow win because they perfect dodge one attack and land a 50% ultimate. Generally speaking, I agree with the notion that ultimates are a bit too strong in this game. You can land a 50% attack off one punch and one dodge. One perfect dodge allows you to do half of someone's health immediately. That is absolutely insane, especially since you can consistently get 2 ults, maybe even 3 ults per game, depending on your style and the matchup. It's very strong, and I think a nerf is necessary to equalize ultimates against, normal attacks and how they define a game's outcome. And I believe that is the logic that this poster is going through when it comes to actually presenting this suggestion. Now, what is ultimate clashing? How does it work? It requires you to have full ultimate, then you need to charge an additional 20%, so adding up to 120% to gain access to ultimate clashing, which is optional, subject to change. Personally, I think right off the bat that this should be a bit harder to gain, because generally speaking, yes, ultimates are very strong, you get 50% off one punch, but you do have to work decently hard for it, especially with feints, making it so that you pretty much have to guess half the time. And if you keep guessing wrong, eventually you won't be able to land the ultimate. Of course, it depends on the situation, but generally speaking, in the end game, you can only make a few mistakes before you end up getting knocked out. So if you keep making mistakes, you'll eventually lose and you won't be able to land that ultimate. When your enemy throws an ult at you, raw, perfect dodge, block break stun, or stamina break stun, you can activate your ultimate to enter defensive stance, activating the ult clash and forcing you both into a minigame, which we'll get into very shortly. The minigame is this. There will be a circle in the middle of the screen, a dot that you have to keep in the circle while it shakes consistently. It's controlled by WASD on PC or joystick on mobile. Not only that, 4 arrows will also appear on the screen every time that you're moving or you're about to move the dot. You have to press the arrow buttons on mobile or arrow keys on PC in the right order and correctly. For example, the series of arrows to appear will be left, down, up, up. You then have to press them in order and get it correctly. After you complete these arrows in sets of 3, you can make your enemy's dot drag away from the circle, forcing them to move back to the circle and drain percentage. If you press the wrong key, then you have to wait for 1 second before doing it again. What this is referring to is the fact that you have a meter called power 100% when you enter the ult minigame state or the ultimate clash. The meter will slowly drain 1% per 0.5 seconds and greatly drain for 1% per 0.1 seconds. The minigame will be ended if a player's power meter drops to 0, and the winner can land the ultimate in terms of its damage depending on the amount of power you have left. When it comes to ultimate clashes on PD, shield break stun, or stamina break stun, if the attacker's power is above 50%, they do the original ult damage. If the attacker's power does 20%, it does super damage, which we'll get into very shortly. It is a percentage of the original damage. For the attacker or defender's power being below 21%, it will be the attacker's strike. When it comes to the ult clash for defenders, when it comes to the defender's power being below 20%, there is no ult and both players are pushed away from each other, resetting to neutral. If the defender's power is above 50%, they do a strike super or strike ultimate. When it comes to ultimate clashes on raw attacks, the winner's power, if above 50%, will be a super. Winner's power on 20% or above 20% will be a strike, but of course it's below 50%, it won't be a super. And for the winner's power being below 21%, there's no ultimate and both players are pushed away from each other. The poster does provide a quick simulation of how this minigame would work. Of course, it would be a bit cleaner in its actual application if developed by Drowning Sim himself. As you can probably tell from the simulation, you have 2 dots, and if you complete a set of 3 arrows, 3 arrow combinations, you have the ability to momentarily drag the dot away from the inner circle and force the other person to drag it back in as quickly as possible, draining their power, and vice versa. Overall, it seems pretty well made or well thought out. I don't really see any glaring issues with this, except with the concept of alt clashing in general, possibly gutting alts too much or being more insufferable rather than actually engaging. It really depends on its execution, how it's implemented. Personally, I think the game's in a fine state right now. I think alts are a bit strong, but they're not overwhelming, especially since you can definitely play around alt PD fishing with the PD meter and M1 feints, and generally speaking, alts aren't nearly as strong as they were before, with no PD meter, no M1 feints, and double dashing still being as strong as it was, especially when double dash PDing was still a thing. Now, when it comes to the outcomes themselves, there's an actual outline that the poster provides on how these would actually look and the numbers that would be associated. For example, besides ultimates, we currently have supers and strikes that result from this alt clash, which would be introduced as a concept, that being weaker versions of ultimates, which have their own animations, are way shorter, less flashy, also dealing less damage. Supers will deal 3/5 of the original alt damage, strikes will deal 3/10 of the original alt damage, and generally speaking, the poster's take on supers and strike animations would look like this. For Ippo, with its ult being 60%, the strike would be a user throws a left hook at the victim, but they dodge the hook, and it turned out the user actually feinted the hook, with the camera zooming into the user's right hook, hitting right at the enemy's liver, so a liver blow. A feint into a liver blow, that's it right off the bat. The simplest super you can make with Ippo, that being the strike. The strike will of course do 18% since it's 3/10 of 60%, although I'm pretty sure it's actually 55, I don't know why you said 60. I'm pretty sure the 55% is its alt damage. I'd have to check though. As for supers, the user performs a Dempsey roll as the victim is desperately trying to land a hit on them, but they fail. On the final fail, regarding the victim's jab, so the final jab that they throw out that they miss, the user will release the Dempsey at the victim, performing 6 strikes, doing 36%. He then goes on about examples for Iron Fist, Chronos, and Shotgun to make his point, and overall, that's pretty much the ultimate clashing mechanic. Me personally, I think this would be good if executed well. If it's not too disruptive when it comes to the usage of ultimates, then I'm fine with this. But I think it should be much harder to get than an ultimate. I mean, way harder. It should be something that you have to hard work towards as a last resort rather than being the defining factor. I don't want games to always have the final outcome being who wins the ultimate clash. That's a horrible idea that would make winning the ultimate clash like the meta, which is absolutely unfair. I don't think ultimate clashing should be a staple part of the game. It should be something that you have to hard work towards as a last resort, as a strategy that you work on in the long run, which means that the immediate instant you're on your last stock and you expect an ult versus ult scenario, you want to save your ultimate for the clash at all costs. Which means I would actually prefer if the ult requirement for ultimate clashing is closer to 150%, maybe 175. I don't think it should be easily accessible. It has no reason to. I do think that ultimates as they are right now are in a decent place and only require a slight nerf. If you know that you're going to be in a situation where you'll be ulted for the win and you are at a net disadvantage, you want to equalize that with a last resort mechanic that doesn't just win the match for you, but acts as a sort of defensive option that nullifies your opponent's ability to kill you. I think that's the intent of this mechanic, making it so that ultimates don't just automatically win you the game. You still have that last stretch that makes it so that your opponent who's losing can still have this last ditch effort where they really lock in, they're able to make the comeback, or just make it so they can survive a bit longer and hopefully end up winning the match if they play well enough. Or alternatively, you're fighting an opponent who you're absolutely smashing, but they land 1 PD, perfect dodge you, and hit you with an ultimate to 55%, and all your hard work is down the drain. With this mechanic, you're able to maintain your advantage by simply just playing this defensive option that you know your opponent's going to play around against to make a comeback and destroy that comeback in the process, so you can guarantee your victory by being the superior player mechanically and technically. And that's pretty much it. If you guys like this suggestion, check it out in the Discord. If you didn't, please tell me what should be improved. If you guys agree this should be mechanic or not, tell me in the comments down below. And for now, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Just a heads up, I will be experimenting with other games at some point and also ramping up my YouTube Shorts content since I have my new PC and I feel like my Shorts content's been pretty dry, especially since I've been using my voice recently, which I'll also bring back around when Ranked V2 gets released, so we'll look into that. That's all for now. See ya.